Okay, well, thanks for joining this morning. Today, we're going to run through our P6-Calculator tool, but we're going to focus just on one aspect of it, and that's going to be some of the different archiving that we've done with P6-Calculator. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm coming to you today from Calgary, and I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald. So let's talk about kind of the sort of example where this kind of work can apply. So a lot of our clients use P6 for regular maintenance management, turnarounds, shutdowns, outage management, and capital projects. So we've got quite a wide range. And when you're using P6 in that sort of environment, it's often integrated. Now, when it's integrated, you usually have a lot of work orders being created in maybe an asset management tool such as SAP or Maximo, JD Edwards. I mean, there's many. Oracle Asset Management. So there's many on the market, and the idea is these work orders are coming into your system. And at some point, of course, that's just going to keep growing. And you need to be careful for how you're dealing with that. Okay. So the data starts to get larger and larger. It makes it more and more difficult for the team to manage. And thus, you could end up with a lot of struggles and, of course, a lot of problems with consistency, repeatability in your planning process, and so on. So before I go too much further, I'm just kind of curious as to whether anyone who's joining today is working in an integrated environment. Okay. It could be to anything, but I'm just kind of curious how many of you are integrated, because this is probably a reasonable target for people integrated. Okay, a bit of a mixed bag. A few people answered, and I'll just give another second for more people to answer. Oh, it's moving around, so I'll just show the results of who answered so far. So it's quite a mixed group, and I think it truly depends um, on the kind of work that your team is doing in P6. So when let's keep touching on that. So when you're working in an environment where you are doing that kind of work, even if it's not necessarily integrated, you end up getting projects that get quite big, and administering P6 can become more and more difficult. The filters take longer, layouts, opening things just get slower and slower. So you don't want your team to be hampered when they're trying to build out the schedules and then when they're trying to do the updates. So those are all things that become very difficult, and making sure that you're reporting on things correctly and closing things out correctly, all that good stuff becomes harder and harder. So when that starts to occur in your system, it becomes problematic. You can't get your updating done as quickly. So these are all things that you want to be able to administer well. So several years ago, we worked on starting to put calculator functions into P6. Now, this is a tool that I use so much. It helps get different data more available in P6. It helps you capitalize on data that's in P6 and do more with it. And it helps you also grow your footprint of usage of your data in P6 to an extended team. Okay, so you can have a much more valuable footprint. It's sort of my favorite tool in all our tools that we have within Emerald, but it's honestly the hardest one to market because it can do so many different things. And today, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about really what you can do with it related to archiving. Okay. and we'll touch on some of the benefits, and I'll run through a few of the case studies of some clients that we've rolled this particular feature of Calculator out. Okay, so we've got a lot of different features in Calculator. Today, it's archiving that we're going to focus on. I'm going to also show you a loop detector, and we've got a few more webinars planned for the next little bit, showing you other features because there's so many. We've got them split up into smaller webinars. So the way that P6-Calculator works is you essentially come up with something you want to calculate or monitor and or flag. And then we create the component, if you will, deploy it to your system, and then it does the automations. The automations can be monitoring something like I'm going to show you today. It could be rolling down data, rolling up data, okay? So for example, on a roll up, some of the things that people like to roll up are resource and expense costs, and you might want to merge those together and get them in a special field. It could be a field that is a straight up calculation. It could also be a field that's a different currency. Okay, so let's say switching Canadian to US dollars as an example. So that way we can automate the different currencies. That helps you with reporting, and it's automatic. Thus, you don't have to do any extra calculations. Okay, so now you get better benefit from what's sitting inside P6. So that's one example. Another example that we use for our contracting clients very, very often would be to take the sell price and calculate the take the cost price, add on your overhead, add on your profit, add on some additional percent factors if you wish, and then come up with the sell price. Okay, so automatically we've got all those calculated, and you can then see all that right inside P6. You can take it into a data warehouse and graph it and so on. Okay, so those are some examples of the different types of calculations. And for automations, today you're going to see what I would call an automation, which is tagging tasks for automatic archiving. Okay, so that's the one we're gonna focus on today. So the way the calculator works, you define what you want, we get it set up, we usually create some fields so you can monitor it, whatever it is. So in this case, it'll be archiving. And then it either runs automatically, but we usually give you a manual run capability, which I'm going to show you again today in this example. Okay, so we'll jump in, and I'll share my screen, and I'll run through the archiving scenario. And we've got more than one type of archiving. I'm going to focus today on the activity and WBS archiving. I'll also explain some of our project archiving, but I'm not going to show that today. I will explain it, and if people are interested, we can definitely put it in next upcoming webinar for auto archiving projects as well. Okay, so how's my screen? Let me know if it's too small. I did bump the resolution up, so hopefully it's coming through okay. Okay, so let me explain what we're looking at. So we're looking at multiple projects that have been tagged to be archived. Okay, so I can archive one or many projects. And what we do is we say, okay, these projects are going to be involved in archiving. And the way that we're going to do archiving is going to be this. Okay, so we give it first and foremost a field here that we've labeled archiving range. Now, what that lets us say is for an activity that is deemed to need to be archived, or a WBS. So it can be a WBS layer or an activity layer. What we're saying is when it meets the criteria, and I'll explain the functionalities there, once it is deemed that it should be archived, tag it to be archived 30 days from now. Okay, so that gives, we always want to give the team flexibility to essentially turn off anything that we've flagged. So we're giving them 30 days from the time it meets the criteria, and then it will be archived. Okay, now this is controlled by the user. So you can see in this project, we've said we want it to wait 60 days. Okay, so that's controlled completely by the user. And that way you've got the flexibility. Okay, so when you've got a group who, let's say, do turnaround projects, they do maintenance projects. Once the maintenance work is done, you may say 30 days from then, it's okay to archive it. But for a turnaround, you may want to wait longer, okay, to make sure. Well, usually you tag it off of some sort of status, okay, and I'll talk about that and give you some ideas there, okay. And that way you've got time to make sure everything's okay, you're comfortable with it, and then it will go and clear out the tasks and or the WBS. And in addition, you can do the same thing for the project. Okay, so you can flag the project that once it's hit a certain status, you can actually get rid of it. And for some of our clients, we don't only get rid of it, some of our clients wanted it to go into a secondary archiving database. Okay, so that's something that we've done as well. Okay, now, always to go along with it, we don't like, like a magic wand of things happening and then the schedulers have no idea what happened. So we always try and include some information, and we take advantage of the notebooks for this kind of thing. So let me open that up just to explain what you're seeing there. So we give a list of information as to what has happened. And we've got it staggered here, just so you have a sort of a historical archive. So this lets us know that the last time I ran the archiving utility, it didn't find any work orders to archive. It didn't tag any new ones, okay? But in the last 10 days, it found one work order, so that's a WBS level, typically, and it had 2 activities that it archived, okay? And it gives you a running list of what it's archiving so that you have that historical data in case you need to do anything with that, okay? Now, typically you don't, it's just for information. However, it's there in case you need it. Now, archiving is getting rid of the activity from your P6. Now, before it just does that, again, we don't like to do anything magically, and poor schedulers have no idea what happens. So we have flagging in here, and I'm going to show that to you in a minute. And it's letting you know which ones have been flagged at the WBS and the activity level, okay? So that we have a running total and you know what's coming up. So this is letting me know that I've got one WBS that's going to be archived within the next 3 days, and coming up in the next 7 days, we've got two activities. Two activities in the next 3 days, and also in the next 7 days, we've got 2 more. Okay, so this gives us a running total. That way we know what's going on, what's coming up, and nothing surprises the schedulers. Okay, now how do you see all that good stuff? So what we do is we go into the, let's go ahead and go into the activity window, and I'll explain what it's doing. Okay, so I've got some that are sort of pre-created so you can see, and I'll do a few live here with you. Okay, So typically when you're integrated to asset management system, you're getting activities coming into your schedule on a regular basis. Okay, so someone's planning them out, putting in the task list, putting in the resources, and then generally the folks in P6 are going to do the scheduling, get the dates aligned, and any logic development. Okay, so that's generally how our clients work. They may do some resourcing directly in P6, so it all depends on your business process. And then updating starts to take place. So either you update in P6 or conceivably they update in another tool. It could be taps. You might be using our taps tool, might be using our caps tool. You might be using your asset management. There's so many different ways that you might be doing. You might be doing updating in a meeting together. So updates start to take place. And then if you're integrated to your system, often there's some sort of status. Okay, so that's going to be the example I'm going to use here. I'm going to use sort of some typical statuses that we might have in the system. So approved, canceled, closed, in progress. I'm going to use those examples in this scenario. Okay, so some of these activities are coming up. Some have already been completed or closed. Some are in progress, waiting to have their updates done. And we've got some that got canceled. Okay, so work orders certainly can be created and then canceled. And then some are still waiting to get worked on. Okay, so we've got a bit of a mixed bag in this example. Okay, now let's try and explain what you're seeing on the screen. Okay, so these were canceled. So that is a status that you typically want to monitor for any archiving. Okay, now it doesn't have to be canceled. You may have different statuses that you have in your system. But the point is really that there could be some sort of status like that. So the way we've deployed the calculator in this scenario for archiving is it's looking at the status. Okay, it's also looking at the work orders, of course, because it's giving you the list of work orders it's archiving, right? And it's already run the archiving utility on this project, as you could see in the statistics I showed you. So we've got some flagging here, and the flagging is date-based on today's date. Okay, so we're on the 15th of October, and it knows that these two are coming up to be archived in the next 3 days. So they're set with a red stop sign. That way you know they're very close to being archived. These next two are within a week. Okay, so it's giving you the warning, just letting you know they're coming up. And then these ones are a little further away, thus no flagging, but they do have a tag as to when they're going to be archived. Okay, so this gives you a good way to, of course, have different layouts with different filtering, all the stuff you're used to doing in P6 to make sure that if you want to see which ones are coming up for archiving, you can. Okay. Again, we don't want to do anything behind the curtain. We want to make sure you can see it, you can monitor it, you can touch it, and you can control it if need be. Okay, so let's run through some examples of what you would typically do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use a fill down on these just to do some updates. Okay, so you would typically do some updates, and I'm going to just cheat for making it a little quicker for the data entry. And some of these would probably get completed. So the preparation, the install, let's go ahead and update those to complete it. And typically that would get closed somewhere in your system. Okay. Now, depending on how your asset management works, these may not get fully closed until the whole work order is closed. So there's different ways that can come together. Okay. So I'll go ahead and do some updates on this next one as well. So I'll do the prep and the install. Okay, so I'll do that. Again, I'm just kind of cheating for easy use so you don't have to watch me do any updating. Okay, now again, this could be coming from TAPS if you use TAPS. And CAPS is another great tool. You might use Team Member. There's so many different great tools to help you do updating. So again, I'll just update this one partially, and I'll update this one fully. Actually, I'll just do that fully, just to give you two different sort of typical scenarios. Okay, so I'll get this one all the way to closed, and I'll leave the other one partly done. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty common kind of scenario that you're going to hit when you're doing different updating. Now let me go look at the WBS for a moment, and then I'll rerun the calculator. Okay, so in this example, again, depending on how you have an integration, we could also have statuses for the whole work order. So not just the task, but also the whole work order. So we can monitor the work order or WBS level as well as monitoring the individual activity level as well. Okay, so we can mix and match the layers. And in this example, you can see we've got a layer at the WBS also marking the same fields. Okay, so it's watching the status, and it's marking whether it's going to archive the whole WBS. So we can do it at different layers, is what I'm trying to get that we can do it not just at the activity level. Okay, so typically Archiver will be running in some automatic fashion. So depending on how you're running it, it could be running in the evening, during the evening, and tagging things. It could be running automatically, or I'm going to run it manually by clearing the archive last run date. That activates the software and tells it to go ahead and run now. Okay, so it's going to run now, and it's going to run through, and it'll start tagging the activities. Okay, so I'll jump back over to the activities, and we should start to see some archiving taking place here, some tagging taking place. It won't just automatically start archiving things. That would not be good. Okay, while it's doing that, there is a question. Let me see if I can read it and possibly answer it. Okay, if activities are removed from the scheduling during archive, will it break the logic in the schedule? Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so first and foremost, it's going to tag them. Okay, so that's what it just did. So it tags the activity. Now, when it actually archives it, so I'm going to manually change some of these dates to try and help answer that question. Okay, so it's tagged it for 30 days from now because that is what I asked it to do at this level. Okay, if I had 45 or 60 days or whatnot, it would have used that for the flagging that it's going to be archived. Now, just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to change some of these, and I'm going to change them to tomorrow. I'll just change this series to tomorrow, and then I'll rerun this just to give you the idea. Okay, it'll just take a second and it'll rerun this. And then we'll run through what it's going to do in terms of logic. So when it archives, so we're going to get it flagged here, and then we're going to run through archiving, and I will set it to today on a few of them, and then you'll see them get removed. So then what you're going to see is, of course, there will be, it's removing them. Thus, these logic ties are going to be dropped. Now, in my example, I don't have any cross WBS logic. If you had cross WBS logic, yes, you're going to drop that logic. Okay, but let's keep in mind these are activities that are completed, and an activity that has logic ties off of it will piggyback the data date in any case, right? Well, of course, depending on how you're running your scheduling questions, not questions, sorry, options, your different options. Okay, so it's tagged these. So you can see that these are up for archiving tomorrow. All right, so it's given me the red stop sign. So it's coming up pretty quick. And let me just bounce back to the summary. So the summary will also be updating. Okay, so you can see that it's growing this number of activities as you would expect. Okay. Okay, now, just so you can see some stuff disappear, I'm going to go ahead and set this to be archived, and I'm going to say it should have been archived yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to just grab two of them, and you're going to see activity 100, activity 110, and I will rerun this one more time, just so you can see it in action. And I'll refresh it just to get it going. And I'll come over here and we'll refresh it. So anything prior to today, of course, when I rerun it, the archiver sees it and says, oh, these should be taken out, removed, and it'll clear them out of the system. Okay, so we'll just give it a second. So I'm just hitting refresh just to get it to show up, and then there they go. And off they go. And then you can see what happens here. Well, in this case, this logic is still in play because these two are still together. Okay, so it does a delete. It does not do a dissolve. If you prefer to dissolve, that's certainly something that's very, very easy for us to put into your deployment. Because this is very, very configurable. Okay, so we're using a status in this case, but if you prefer just to use an actual finish because you're not integrated to an asset management and you don't have a status per se, that's very easy for us to deploy in that manner. Okay, so it ran through, it took two activities out, and then the statistics, I'll just pop that open so you can see it a bit more clearly. You can see the statistics are being updated on every pass. Okay, so you know what it just did, what it did in a previous run, how many activities, how many work orders, and WBS layer. Okay, so and then it updates what's coming up because it just removed some of these. Okay, so these are constantly being updated again, so you have that audit trail and you have the ability to monitor what it's doing. Okay, now as I mentioned, for some of our clients, we've done some other scenarios. So we've done archiving of the project as well, which will remove the project. We have done archiving into a secondary database. So you actually take the project and you put it into another database automatically. So that way you don't have to export it and import it and do those steps. Okay, so that's something we've done as well. And so that's available as well from an archiving perspective. Okay, so let's just look at one other feature that has been really valuable for our clients. Okay, does the archived activity come with baseline data? Okay, I'm not sure if I understand exactly what that question is asking, but let's touch on baselines. Okay, so when we archive a project and push it into another database, we can certainly grab the baselines. And also, when we're deleting a project, so we're archiving it right out of the database, we can certainly archive the baselines out as well. Now, let's touch on things that you need to think about if you're interested in something like this, okay? So generally, the clients that we do these archiving, automatic archiving for, they're often doing their reporting in a third-party tool, okay? So they usually have our data warehouse. They're snapshotting the data into the warehouse, and then that data is being used to put out reports in things like Tableau, Power BI, Oracle data visualization, business objects. You know, we've worked with clients on so many of them. So what that lets you do is keep P6 clean, okay? Because you're doing the reporting off of a third-party reporting system, okay? Okay, let's just see. I think there's another question that came in. The archive of a project is only to another database. This doesn't provide the export function to remove it from the database as a compressed export. Okay, so that's a good question. So the archive that we've done currently is to push it to another database and then remove it from the current one. If you wanted to also launch an XER or an XML, I'm not sure if we can. Ravi, can you try and answer that question? I just don't know if it's a job service we can grab onto.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can export XMLs, but we cannot export XCR files using the API, but XMLs are good.
Okay. So it's something we can automate through an XML process. Okay, good. So it's not what we've done in these examples, but it is something that we could add to the calculator function. If you also wanted an export, the export would be in an XML format. And XML exporting also allows for multiple baseline exporting. Okay, so we could certainly achieve that approach that way as well. Okay, so just let us know if that's something of interest and we can explore it. Okay, I think I've tackled all the questions up there currently. Okay, so I just wanted to spend the next 5 minutes showing another feature that we've got, that we've created for our clients that do auto scheduling. And it's an automatic loop detector. Okay, so I'm going to open this project. And so when you have a lot of projects and you want to make sure that your team is updating consistently, regularly, we've built a tool called auto scheduling. Okay, now there's a job service inside P6 also, which allows you to move the data date and auto schedule. We've had some struggles with it though, with some of our larger clients. It doesn't always work properly, and what we're finding is sometimes it does error out. So we we had built an auto scheduler for previous versions, so we are still using that with many clients. And what it lets you do is it lets you have the data date move in a regular, consistent manner. Okay, so when you're doing portfolio reporting on many capital projects or many outages as well, you want to make sure that that reporting method is consistent so that your data date is moved consistently. So what we found was when there's loops, which you don't always know because you might do a bunch of logic changes and you didn't have a chance to reschedule, you may not know that you made a loop by mistake. Okay, so we created this loop detector, and it works really, really well. And what it does is it does what it's called. It finds any loops and it shows it to you without having to schedule. Okay, because of course, if I hit F9, it's going to let me know the loops are there. Now, if it's just one loop, it's not that hard to go ahead and fix it up. Well, depending on what it is, because the loop might have a lot of activities and it's not always obvious where the loop came in. But I remember being on an outage and having, we were building a lot of the schedule and we were doing a lot of logic creation. And my colleague scheduled it and we had 100 loops. And yeah, he had to leave the room for a few minutes because choice words were coming out of the mouth. So that was disconcerting because now we had to trace down so many loops. And so something like this can be kind of handy for all sorts of purposes. So let me just show you kind of how it works. Okay, I've pre-created some loops and I'll go ahead and clean them out and you'll see how this thing works. Okay. So this is kind of obvious in a small little example here, but I've created a loop intentionally, of course, and it highlights where the loop is. So it's got the first activity as a stop sign and then the rest involved as a yield sign. Okay. So this can be super duper handy when you're trying to find the loop and figure out how to fix it. Okay. So when you schedule, you get the report, but this gives you nice visuals. So I can go ahead and clear this loop by clearing that logic tie, and I can rerun that. Okay, so I just created a few different examples just so you can see kind of how that looks. Now to rerun it, it's very much like what I did for the archiver. And I'm just going to clear that out just to give you an example. And you can see in this case, we didn't use a notebook. We just used a simple user-defined field to let you know that this project has loops, and it gives you not just kind of an idea of how big the problem is. Okay. So when you're running auto scheduling, this is you need a dual thing, because if it can't schedule if there's loops. It cannot complete the calculation, the forward and backward pass. It can't complete it. So this is where this becomes really handy. Okay. So I'll keep clicking on that, but I'll go in here so we can see it inside of the tool. Okay, so there you go. So it clears it out because it's run through and it sees it's fixed. So this would clear out. Okay, now if you had a filtered layout, this would be so handy because then you can just keep working through the loops. Okay, now this is another thing that can be really useful for a less experienced scheduler who's learning how to use P6. This can happen easily, when you're building out logic. So this can be a really great little utility when you're coaching schedulers up. When you're working in a multi-scheduler environment, this can be very, very handy because it could be another person who created the loop. So you're really like, how did that happen? How did this go awry? Okay, so this is another just tiny little feature in Calculator, and it can be really useful. Okay, so I thought, I knew this archiving one was going to be a little shorter than an hour, so showing you just one other little feature inside of the calculator tool. We've got so many, and that's why I love this tool. It really brings another layer of easy use to our P6 clients. We've got lots of little features, which is kind of gets it neglected on the marketing side because there's so many little ones that we've got available. So in the next few weeks, next few months, we're going to keep putting on some of these webinars to show some of these features because we only build them to make your life better and easier in P6. And there could certainly be something your group is struggling with or finds very time consuming. And that's what Calculator does. It really takes away lots of hours and makes it easier to use P6. Okay, one more question came in. Can you show the setup screen for archiving? This is just to get an idea what options are available. Okay, so P6-Calculator is a tool that's not really got a GUI to it. So we set it up for our clients. So I can't actually show that. I can't show all of it. I tried to show some of it with, let me go back. Let me go back to the archiving layout. I tried to show some of the pieces that a user would be able to administer. Okay, so ultimately we're administering the date range piece. Administering the different flagging, we would do that. We would set it up and then off you go. Now, if you wanted different flagging for different projects, it's also something we could do. So we would just change the way the program works and we would do that, get it set up. So generally to deploy one of these features is we kind of score them as to simple, medium, and a bit more complex. So this would be probably something simple to medium. It would take probably 1 to 4 hour type of thing to deploy it, have you test it, and then put it out into production. Okay, so generally when our clients choose to buy Calculator, we have some consulting from Emerald along with it to help you deploy these different utilities. And the tool's not expensive. You know, it's a few $100s a month. And you get access to all the features we've got, and we can build additional ones with a bit of consulting, and then off you go. Okay, and you can run it. It's not user-based. It's just a subscription that you can run on your database, and you can have as many different utilities that you want deployed. Okay, so the subscription is basically on how many utilities you're running. That's the way we sell it. Okay, so if you have any other questions, throw them in. I'll stay in the software for another minute. If not, I'll jump back and wrap up. Oh, sorry, there's another one. I missed it. Can we retrieve the archived activities WBS back in the schedule if needed? No. That's why we give you a grace period. So once we delete, so I say no if you're doing the archiving that deletes them. If you're doing the archiving that pushes the project to another database, then yes, I mean, you would be able to get them back. That's why we don't, generally, most of our clients chose not to delete them outright. Let me just go to the other project. Whoops, let me go to this project. That's why they chose not to delete them outright. And they give, some waiting period before deleting them. Okay, that way they know they're closed out completely in their asset management system. You've received all the updates. Okay, so generally there's a certain status that you get to for those updates, and that's the status you go against. Okay, so close. There's usually close. Maybe there's complete when all the updates are done, and then it goes to close when all the financial commitments are done. So you usually run it off of the last status just for that security blanket so that it doesn't delete something you don't want to. Okay. Now that's why we track the work order generally as well, so that if for some reason you needed to fire it back in from your other system, you could generally do that. But yeah, the way that it's built, once it's archived, it's archived. Okay. Okay, good. I think those are all the questions. And so I'll go ahead back to wrap up. Okay. Okay, so let's touch on some of the benefits. Well, the main benefit, of course, to this sort of auto archiving is, of course, keeping your P6 clean, tidy, um, in a more effortless manner. Okay, so if any of you are administering your P6 systems, you know that it can be, depending on how you're using it, it can be quite a big effort to keep things clean and maintained. So if I had to do this manually, you know, I'd have some sort of layout and I'd be cutting and pasting, or with the layout, I'd be deleting. And I'd be doing that probably once a week, once a month. So it would be work that I'd need to be doing. And it's what I would call low value work in many cases. And so anything that you can do to automate some of that low value work is definitely worth it. Also, programming it leaves less room for error, right? So I could accidentally delete something I didn't mean to. With a program doing it, there's a lot less room for error. So there's that benefit as well, just the consistency that you bring to the table. And the other thing is anything you can do to remove what I would call, well, I called it low value work, but it's also very repetitive and mind numbing kind of work, the better, right? That way you're using your team more efficiently for what they're really good at, which is developing your plan, developing your schedule. So that's really the key benefit to these things. So I just wanted to touch on of two case studies explicitly related to archiving. Okay, so we've got a large electrical utility that we work with in the US that have millions of tasks to perform each year. They schedule all their maintenance work, customer work, everything except emergency work really is scheduled in P6 and tied into their asset management system, Maximo, and they've got an updating tool as well that they use called Click Scheduler. Okay, so it's all integrated, but P6 is really driving the scheduling components. With so many activities and many work groups to manage, it's a lot of work to keep the system cleaned up. So auto archiving completely makes sense in that scenario. Keeps the database clean. It keeps the database clean of extra work orders, which are WBS levels in one case, extra tasks, and also projects. So we actually archive the projects as well. So in their scenario, we're using their work order status, which ties to their Maximo system. The users can control the timing, as I showed you in this scenario, and it's saving hundreds of man hours of work to maintain their P6 each year. Okay, so for them, it's really a no-brainer, and their team is very overworked as it is, and just this takes one less thing off their plate, and it keeps their projects from growing exponentially each year. Okay, so that was also for performance, of course, of P6. that it made sense to do. Now, in their case, they're also reporting out using our data warehouse to snapshot every week and push it out to Power BI for their corporate reporting. Okay, so it made sense to keep the database clean by deleting or archiving tasks. So we've got another client using the auto archiving aspects. And in their case, it's a mining company. They have many plants around the world and primarily in North America. And they've got hundreds of projects at each plant that are being done each year. During some are during outages that they take. So they've got a lot of capital projects that run during outages, and they've got their weekly maintenance program being run through P6 as well. Okay. Including mini outages and shutdown days. So they do all that planning in P6. So it's a similar scenario, but it's a different industry and slightly different flavor. They are integrated to Oracle Asset Management, and we have an automated integration running every few minutes for them. So their work orders are coming in automatically. So similar requirements so that their database doesn't just keep growing out of control. They needed the ability to close out small OPEX projects that were financially closed out, and they needed that automation as well. So similar requirements. We've got project auto archiving. We've got project moving, so they move it into an archive band inside their existing project. They leave it there for a certain amount of time, and then once that is that time has elapsed, so I think it's 90 days in their case, we actually grab that and push it out to a secondary database. Okay, so that's their process, and it just keeps, it really saves them, again, hundreds of hours of maintenance because they don't have to take care of it. It's done automatically, and they too are using Power BI for additional reporting. Okay, so those are some examples explicitly around the auto archiving that we've got with clients. We've got additional ones, but these are two that I thought would be most interesting. Okay, so if you have any additional questions, throw them in, but I wanted to thank you for joining today. This is just one of many different things that we do with P6. We've got lots of additional functions in Calculator that we'll be highlighting in some upcoming webinars. We've got other tools that I've mentioned for updating. So if you need some super fantastic updating tools, we've got TAPS, which is our barcode scanner tool. We've got CAPS, which is our grid-based, web-based updating. We've got Loader, which helps you load data in and out of P6. So we've got a lot of different utilities. And we've built them so that we can help you. Okay, so if you've seen something interesting with the archiving, let us know how you'd like us to keep in touch related to that. So just throwing up a question that if you have some interest, you think there's something that could be beneficial for your team, let us know how you'd like us to keep in touch. And you can go ahead and answer that poll if there's something specifically, and then we'll keep in touch that way. That just helps us make sure we're doing the best we can to help you on an ongoing basis. So we have so many tools because from the very beginning, 27 years ago, we had programmers on our team from the very beginning. It was something we recognized as, because I worked in claims and disputes, I understood how important it was to have better access to data. So we've had programmers from the very beginning. And integration's a key thing that we've done also from the very beginning. So from Indus Passport, SAP in the early days, and we've done many in the last few years, Maximo, JD Edwards, Oracle, EAM, SAP, Smart Plant Foundation, and many, many different tools. Okay, so automation, integration, big part of what we do. That's why we have so many great utilities available. Not just for P6, for Unifier, we had many for contract management, of course, and we're building more for AConnects as time goes by. So just let us know what we can do on those fronts. Okay, so I answered most of the questions. I didn't necessarily type them in. I answered them verbally. If you do have any other questions, I'll stay on for the next minute or two. If you think of a question after, absolutely feel free to follow up. I've got my email in there. If you're in APAC, you can also reach out to Donna Ureta, so Donna Yu at Emerald Associates. She's our rep in Philippines, and you can definitely reach out to me as well. Okay, doesn't look like any other questions at this moment. Oh, there might be another one. Let's just see. Oh, thanks, Shannon, for putting in Donna's email. So that's definitely another way to reach out. Okay, great. Thanks, Joey. Yeah, absolutely. Reach out, send us a question if you have any now. I'm going to stop the recording and I'll stay on for another minute. We'll